Star Trek Discovery episode 12, Vaulting Ambition. Yet another episode that proves what geniuses we are when it comes to prognostication and prediction. Star Trek Weekly starts now.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Look, it was inevitable. If we were going to keep doing mirror songs and they stayed in the mirror universe long enough, we were getting to no message could have been any clearer. We would have had Man in the Mirror. And you know what? I'm not disappointed. I'm excited. Welcome to Star Trek Weekly. I'm Christian Bladt. You can find me at Christian DMZ. Kari Lane on assignment at Sundance, but we have sitting in Cherry Davis, where people can find you at Cherry_LA.
Yes.
Welcome to the panel. Thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me.
And on the other end of the desk, as he always is, the one, the only, Frank Moran. Where can people find you?
And Twitter and Instagram at HappyGoJackie.
And there's so much to talk about this episode, but I feel like we can take a couple minutes at the top because this episode of Star Trek Weekly is going to be longer than this episode of Star Trek Discovery, which clocked in under 38 minutes. Yep. And boy, if I was paying for CBS All Access, I would be really upset. But
Really?
since that way, because that's like a solid 5 minutes shorter than your network TV show, 42 minutes.
True.
You know? So I'm like, where are those extra minutes? You know, why would they do that to me? Why was this one so short? Usually it's more like 49 minutes. So it averages out. It's fine. But you know what? This week, I had time. I wanted 5 more minutes. You know, they could have given us something. But
I also feel like it's, because we talked about it last week, where if it runs long, we don't mind that as well. You get on the streaming, you get the luxury of being able to tell the story and the length that you want to tell it. And
it's true. And on network television, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, Cherry, they would have spun their wheels. They would have had like Stamets wander around for a little bit extra longer, you know, like going in some other hallways and seeing, you know, it wouldn't have added to the story, right? So it's probably better.
I like that it was concise. And
Yeah.
to me, it didn't feel like it was 39 minutes because I was on the edge of my seat or the edge of my couch.
That's true. I also was. But Cherry, since this is your first time here on the panel, we always like to get to know everyone. What are some of your favorite things about Star Trek? Characters, movies, episodes. You tell us some of your favorites.
Well, I grew up watching the original Star Trek, so I love
You have that in common with Frank and I.
So I have always wanted to do this, but genetically, I just can't.
I've known people that can't do this, and sometimes I can't do it the wrong way. They can get like the third finger, but so you have to actually hold it.
Yes.
That's interesting.
I think it's a genetic thing, like, because I can make my tongue twist, and not everyone can make their tongue twist.
Let me ask Frank an important question. Do you think that this is sort of like a genetic thing, like it's because she's actually Vulcan, she's somehow been modified to not be able to do it, to throw us off the scent? Sort of like how Data's twin Lore had the little tick, so he got rid of it and then he gave it to Data. So do you think that's what happened here, and she's actually a Vulcan?
Well, that's true. I mean, I did notice that her hair covered her ears, so I cannot.
We can't tell. That's true. And everything you've said so far has been very logical.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite episode from the original series, or a favorite character?
I loved favorite characters. Mine one was the Catwoman. I thought she was so cool.
Sure.
Very neat. And then, of course, I love the first kiss between Uhura and Captain Kirk.
Oh, yeah.
And, gosh, what else did I love? I always really loved my captains. My favorite captain was Captain Picard, who I got to meet one time in Washington, D.C., because he's a Shakespearean actor, and he did Othello.
He is indeed a well-trained Shakespearean actor. It is not Shakespeare, but I did once see Patrick Stewart do his one-man show of A Christmas Carol, which is fantastic. Yeah.
That would have been cool.
Yeah, he hasn't done it in a long time, but you know what, he should. But you know, it's Christmas time. Well, anyway, and in general, are you enjoying Star Trek Discovery?
I had to let go of me expecting it to be like the Star Treks that I grew up with, because they are not following the Prime Directive as I would have, and there's a lot more conflict between the characters. But after watching this episode, I get it more now. And I was promised a 2-woman captain and her lieutenant, and when that was taken away, me and my friends had a major like meltdown, but I've decided to forgive them for that.
Well, that's interesting because that sort of brings us full circle to where we are in tonight's episode. And we do indeed see the return, to some extent, of Philippa Georgiou, Emperor Georgiou, which I thought was a very cool reveal at the end of last episode. You're not usually here, Cherry, but we're going to go ahead and retoot our own horn. We had called that. That was our expectation of like, well, they haven't shown us who it was. So I think Frank was the first one to say it. I'm going to give you the credit.
Well, I will accept that credit, but you know, I think it's a team effort.
Yeah,
guys.
and there's
It's a
always
team
stuff
effort.
in the chat. The people in the chat,
Yes.
you know, and there's something very important at the end of this episode that actually came from the chat. At least as far as I could tell, they pointed something out, and we ran with it, and we'll take co-credit for it, but we will not take full credit for it. But look, it was great to see sort of the interaction again, and you know, it's great that they could find a way to get Michelle Yeoh back into the show. I mean, it's interesting. What were your thoughts when you saw sort of the opening of this episode and getting to see Emperor Georgiou?
She looked totally badass. I love the uniform. First of all, I love the uniforms on the evil side. They're much more fashion forward, and they look very good on their bodies.
In every timeline, by the way. In every timeline when they've gone to the Mirror Universe, the uniforms are always much better.
They are.
Speaking of Uhura, the Uhura Mirror Universe, 2 thumbs way up, especially when I was like 10 years old. But anyway, go ahead.
And then watching her come down and just being in charge, and the look of surprise and a reminder of their relationship. They always had a mother-daughter. They had more of a mentor relationship in our universe, but for it to just segue into a mother-daughter, I totally got it. And I was just so excited because they had such affection for each other. And she did bequeath her sword, or Catan, whatever, when she passed away.
Right.
So she obviously looked at her as a daughter. It was just unspoken. And so the interplay between them, her smacking Lorca down as he deserves to be smacked down 24/7, was very pleasing for me.
Well, and the impression we get is he probably enjoys the occasional smackdown. But I like the fact that, yeah, Georgiou and Burnham were actually mother-daughter in the other side. And it's funny, for an unsentimental, brutal, heartless world, there is sort of this, inside the Emperor, there's this affection for Burnham. What did you think, Frank?
It was interesting. I mean, certainly if you take Sarek out of the picture, then it does make sense that certainly she would look towards Georgiou as a mother, and it does make an excellent substitute in the Mirror Universe for why those two are so close in that kind of relationship. I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like as much as Michelle Yeoh is fantastic, I also thought like, I don't know if I'm liking the delivery of her as the Empress.
Well, it's interesting because they very much, you know, the direction was don't be like you were in the pilot. You know, you can't be that same person. It's true. You know, she doesn't seem to have the evil delivery down as well as Cadet Tilly. Of course, she's faking it when we see it, so that's the difference. I think it's a good point, but I like sort of the moment when they're eating, and of course, you know, what they were eating. That was very interesting, which is not something that I really saw coming. But and then just sort of the reveal that, you know, actually I know you were working with Lorca to overthrow me, and that kind of puts Burnham in a situation. There's really only one way out, you know, and she has to prove that she is from the other universe. And as this is not our big prediction, but as we kind of surmised, the idea of the alternate reality is definitely kept very quiet in this Mirror Universe. Judging from her reaction, she was more than aware of it, clearly, but didn't want the 6 people in the room to know, so she killed 5 of them. So, I don't know, I thought that it was interesting, surprising show of brutality, but sparing Burnham because she understood, like, well, if you're from there, let's see, you know, what you have to offer.
I do like it. It's smart to, like, if you're going to kill the majority of the people in the room, I guess it's better to leave one person alive to do all the cleanup.
Yes.
Because,
Yeah.
I mean, she's the emperor.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have to clean anybody up. And then you have the one person who knows, like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to talk about this. I know what would happen if I did. So, you know, the questions are really like, what happens? Like, you don't even want to know, man. What were you going to say, Cherry?
Well, personally, how I feel she portrays the emperor is as a woman who has to remain cold all the time because she's a woman. And even when you see all the other leadership positions, I suspect it's still male heavy. So when you're a woman and you're in charge, you can't be too strong as a woman because then you're a bitchy person. I don't know if we're allowed to say that word.
Oh, you can say anything on, because we're in the glories of YouTube, so we can say whatever you like.
And then I think she was also shocked when she saw Michael and she was upset and she realized, dang it, I'm going to have to kill my daughter. I mean, so she was trying to keep her emotions under control.
Yeah, that's interesting because it was probably in some way relief that she felt she had died and didn't have to do it herself. It's like, all right, well, you know, this happened in their own way. And Nicholas Stormy has an interesting theory that I was thinking during the episode. Maybe the mirror universe, Michael Burnham is still alive. Entirely possible, by the way. And maybe we will see her in the weeks or week ahead. I don't know how many more mirror universe episodes we can have because we only have... What do we have? We have 3 more episodes, 13, 14, 15. So... and Nicholas Stormy also says, yucky Kelpian ganglia. Blah. You know what? If you put enough hot sauce on it, it tastes fine. So, you know, just don't tell Saru that I said that. Anyway, I think that it's sort of interesting to watch all of this unfold. And then we're still not getting the answers about what happened to the Defiant, you know, because it's like, oh, we have the final file. It's mostly redacted. So we don't really know about that. We'll get back to that storyline, but... oh, no, I'm sorry. I just wanted to point out one thing. I made a note. The Imperial, the Emperor's ship, it kind of looked like a cruise ship to me with like all these lights. It's like come down up to the casino deck. I'm like, it didn't look threatening, you know. I thought it would almost resemble not that it would look like a bird of prey, but it would be ominous, you know. And this is just like it's like the party boat. Everybody come on in. It's the groove cruise. It's the booze cruise. And I was just like distracted by it. I actually like rewound it. I'm like, what is that? What it really looks like?
It's luxury. She's the Empress, darn it. She travels in style. That's a Rolls Royce of ships.
But it's not a style. From the exterior, it's not a stylish looking vessel. It's just
no. It's definitely
Just bright.
It's pretty on the inside.
Women like pretty shiny things. Ooh, I'm sexist.
So one of the other storylines that continues throughout the course of this episode is Tyler Vaak. There was a good nickname for him last week. What was it? Gang in the chat? I can't remember.
Is it Ty Vaak?
Yes. You know what? There it is. And I think it's interesting to see, and, you know, Laurel is not interested in helping out, and I think Saru does the only thing he can. He's like, all right, well, then he's going to just die right here in front of you. And she's like, all right, let me try and heal him. I don't know. I find sort of the portrayal to be interesting. Sort of some of the back and forth. Like Tyler breaks through occasionally, and it's mostly just yelling in Klingon. What do you think, Cherry, as we sort of see literally the breaking of Ash Tyler?
Well, I think she turned him fully human because he can't be turned back to being a Klingon, which is awesome, which means that their love will flower once they forgive each other for all that sort of thing. I thought it was interesting because she was willing to let him die if she couldn't see him. But that is her boyfriend, her boo, her lover.
Yeah.
So, you know, she's not going to have him die in her arms. And that's why she was like, no, she's going to go to that bloody cow and steal him away from me. Oh, jealousy.
Frank, do you think, this is more speculation, do you think that the process that they put Tyler through, do you think that the more humanoid-looking Klingons that we saw in the original series, do you think that that's what happened to them, that they did that for some reason? Or do you think that there's a different, better explanation?
I feel like there's got to be a different, better explanation for that.
Because this seems excruciating.
It does, and I also feel like I'm still not exactly sure on the process. Like when she describes that they took some of, they harvested some of his organs, they reconstituted his consciousness. They also then slipped slipped in Vox consciousness in there as well. But they also did like they reduced some of the bone sizes and stuff as well. So exactly what got like changed from Vox to Tyler, I'm still kind of
it's still a little murky. And you know, I know it's been pointed out in the chat and other places that the humanoid Klingon appearance was explained much better on Enterprise. I still don't feel like I have it, like why they were doing it and why they all of a sudden just stopped. You know,
but I also feel like I don't know if this is the great plan to begin with, because I feel like so far it hasn't really benefited in any kind of reasonable way.
No, I mean, because if you're going to go through all the effort to do this, to have you know, a spy, a Klingon who looks like a human, that's like for a long game. That's something that you did like, you know, 5-10 years ago, you know, and it's been a month. Two. I mean, it's hard to quite tell the timeline for what's happened. It hasn't been for very long. Cherry, does this seem like an effective espionage technique?
It's not effective because he never communicated with them. So what information did they want him to get exactly? Unless it was to assassinate the leader of...
Right.
But he would never... The position he was in and him being on that ship, he'd never have access to the leadership. So either A, Klingons don't really know the management of us.
Yeah.
Or B, she was just experimenting because they were going to like kill him anyway. And she was like, oh, well, let's try and figure out some way to save him. I don't know. It didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense. I was like, okay. They just wanted to put him in, they just wanted to put a Klingon in a human body and have that drama. That's what they were like. Ugh.
Yeah, and it's just it seems like a lot of effort for, you know, the potential return, at least in the short, you know, the short term. There wasn't going to be much there, as far as I could tell.
But I guess it's maybe because I'm sure there are real world kind of similarities to this, where some agency will hatch a plan that kind of just goes belly up because they didn't really have the foresight to kind of anticipate things, which probably is, you know, great to happen in the real world, but as a dramatic narrative in a show, it's like, I don't know if I want to watch a failure as opposed to a successful running of a long con.
Clark Stark in the chat says the Tyler Vogt plot seemed retconned somehow. The dialogue was vague. You know, it's interesting. You'll see that a lot on TV. This is a little bit of a tangent, but one of the shows that I do is Marvel TV Weekly, and we were talking about the 2-hour season finale of The Gifted on Fox, and there were so many scenes where key pieces of dialogue were done on the other actors close up with like really bad ADR, additional dialogue recording. So I think a lot of times you don't get the story you want, so you have to figure out a way to make it work with what you shot. And it's true, maybe they still don't quite have it figured out, you know? And Diggs Briarthon says the plan was probably to steal the Discovery, but they needed L'Rell to activate Voq first. And... I mean, maybe. I guess they did want to know how the Discovery was able to be so effective. They wanted the technology. And I guess that just, you know, they were not able to be successful. Yes, Cherry, you seem like you're figuring it all out.
Would not have been the best choice. If they'd had the body of an engineer, then he would have been in the engineering section. And he'd have seen it, or the scientific section. But him being basically a security guard, he wouldn't have access to everything. But again, I think it's because the Klingons' hierarchy is so different.
That's very true. They might think he had greater access, but also they were limited in terms of the prisoners that they had. You know, so it was either going to be him, or it was gonna be Mudd, you know. So I guess it was one or the other, but
or the captain if they.
Well, by the time they got him, they had already started the long game, from what it seems like. But yeah, or the short long game. Another ongoing storyline is our pal Lieutenant Stamets, who this is another one of our predictions that was correct. It was just more being observant, right, Frank, that we noticed that it wasn't like a dream manifestation that he ran into, you know, himself, that he was indeed running into Lieutenant Stamets in a Terran Empire uniform.
Yeah.
But it was still interesting. And out of all the people we've met in the Terran Empire, and maybe he was putting on a show for his friendlier, you know, other reality self or other universe self, but he seemed like almost the same guy, really. You know, he seemed pretty much the same, because our Lieutenant Stamets is, you know, he's a little bit of a wise ass. He is also a little bit of a hard ass, you know. And I don't know. It just seemed like he was talking to himself, not the way that, as so often the mirror universe is portrayed, where you're talking to just this like brutal, like sinister version of yourself. I think the only difference is that his intentions seemed far less altruistic, and he was trying to, you know, sort of monopolize the whole spore drive system. What did you think, Cherry?
I think that he was doing some sort of cruel experiment because he knew that the spore creatures were sentient and he didn't care. And I also think he was trying to make his own spore drive so that the Empress could maybe invade the other mirror universe.
That's very possible. And Nicholas Stormy says, pretty sure Stamets woke up in the other Stamets body, but he doesn't realize it yet. I'm not quite sure that that's what happened, but I guess it's entirely possible. We didn't see enough from either of them. I guess that they could have, I mean, because when we see the first Stamets wake up, it is indeed the mirror ship. So I guess they could have actually traded places. That was not the way I saw this. Diggs Briarthorn says that the mirror universe Stamets is jovial but still evil. Your thoughts on all of this, Frank?
Yeah, because I do feel like if our Stamets woke up on the mirror universe ship, I still think he would be like, wait a minute, this is not my engineering. I think he'd still be, and he just got up and walked with a purpose.
Yeah.
So I feel like as of right now, I would agree with you that I don't think we've seen enough to say that that is indeed what happened. I thought that initially for a second, but I felt like the first Stamets we saw got up too confidently to make me think that it was a switcheroo. But I do like that at least the stuff in the mirror universe, it runs on a spectrum. It doesn't have to be polar opposites in terms of I'm really good, I'm really evil. That there can be a sliding scale on that. So I feel like Stamets is probably the one that's kind of closest. I mean, we've never seen the real Lorca, at least the Prime Universe one, so we don't know how that adds up. But in terms of that, there can be just like small differences in terms of your cruelty, where our Stamets was a lot more kinder and gentler towards the spore creatures. The Stamets just had to have that particular part, just wasn't as nurturing or caring, and saw them as something to be exploited.
Yeah, Stress-Free K points out that Prime Stamets recognized Tilly immediately. And, I mean, this Tilly, though, is basically just Tilly with a makeover. It's like her hair looks different. She looks a little bit different. But it's not like her in the, you know, the Terran Empire Captain's uniform.
But also had the vision of her dressed like that with the... So
that's true, yeah.
So I think seeing her just in the hair would still like, oh, yeah, I recognize Tilly.
I thought that was sort of an interesting thing that the mirror Stamets was only able to send like brief flashes, you know, little images over to Stamets Prime, for lack of a better way to differentiate them. And, you know, that is what accounts for the things that he saw, knowing that Tilly was a captain and all of that. Yes.
I don't think he was in a coma the way he said he was, because I don't think the Emperor would allow someone to be in a coma just sitting in their lab for like a couple of weeks. I think he was trying to contact him to sort of look through his eyes to figure out how he was making the spore drive work. And being in his mind a little while, as well as seeing what was going on, I think he was like, Eureka! I figured out how to steal the spore drive from them. And he's running off to his Empress to kiss booty and impress her and be like, yay, I win. Woo, I'm the best.
Well, it seems like they both have a eureka moment. And they're both, you know, it'll almost be, at least my theory is that they're going to be working against each other to see who can, you know, sort of get things done first. And, you know, we will see that next week.
Well, because I think we've seen, at least in the Prime Universe, that we can see why the spore drive isn't a viable option going forward, just because of the cost they take on a human if they got that to be the stand-in for the creatures. But I feel like the mirror universe does not have that same kind of compassion, so they would be more than happy to get the schematics and then exploit those creatures for as long as they possibly could.
Wellington Smith in the chat says, I'd love to, quote-unquote, recognize Tilly. You dirty dog, you. Looks like Wellington Smith has a crush on Cadet Tilly. Good for you, by the way. She's, you know, she's interesting. Let's put it that way. And Cherry wouldn't know this, but the first 2 episodes, I was surprised that she hadn't died yet. She just seemed like that kind of character. So I've become very fond of her because of the fact that I'm like, you know what, she has beat the odds, and she has outlasted a number of characters that we didn't expect her to outlast. So I think that's good. Good question. Are they going to take the Defiant back to the Prime Universe? I mean, they'd have to get their hands on it, you know, and it doesn't seem like that's something that the Empress is, or they don't even really call her Empress, do they? Is she an Empress or an Emperor?
She's the Emperor.
She is an Emperor, so it's good. That's very strong, you know. It's almost, it's like keeping making it a gender neutral term, you know, like an actor instead of an actress. But in any case, and I can't imagine that they're going to be allowed to bring that back.
No, they won't.
Capronis or Capronice, it would be cool if they had to take the Defiant and destroy the Discovery. Then next season we got a ship that looked more in line with the Enterprise. Yeah, but they spent a lot of time, I'm talking about in the real world, they spent a lot of time designing and developing this ship. I'm pretty sure that they want to have a ship that looks like this, not something that was designed in 1966. But
to go back to one last thing with
sure.
Stamets is just the scenes, because we had speculated what was the deal with the Doctor, with Hugh.
Yeah.
And to see that it looks like he's indeed going to remain dead, but that they still had a chance to reconnect.
I thought that was sort of a very sweet scene that they got to actually say goodbye, you know.
Yes.
And, you know, there was some theorizing, mostly in the chat, that, well, with his crazy spore powers, could he bring him back to life? And then, of course, there's still the idea that there is a Hugh in the Mirror Universe, and we have not seen him yet.
Yes.
So will we see him on that Stamets' ship, or are they not together? It's interesting because, again, through the different portrayals of the Mirror Universe, usually people who are tied together in the Prime Universe have at least some kind of connection in the Mirror Universe. So it'll be interesting if we do get to see him. I don't know if they have time to have those kind of nuances in the story. There's a lot of big picture things that need to happen, don't you think, Frank?
I would agree, but I'm glad that we at least got this moment.
Yeah, I was very glad we got this, because, yeah, and imagine if we didn't have this moment, then the episode would have been like 32 minutes. So, you know.
But I also like when Hugh says, like, oh yeah, there's a piece of everybody here in the network, that it kind of made me think, like, oh, this is going to be just like the precursor to the Nexus. So there's just always Do you
think Dr. Sauron was in there somewhere?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
he could have been.
Kirk is out there chopping wood somewhere.
He's got to make breakfast.
That's right. There you go.
You know, he's still look. There's still a lot of captains that Kirk needs to make breakfast with. He's still never made breakfast with Captain Janeway, Captain Sisko, Captain Archer. You know, and you know, there's time. You know, Shatner's writing that book right now. Anyway, so those were sort of like some of the key things that went on throughout the course of the episode. And then we kind of get this realization as we get back to Georgiou and Burnham, was Lorca and the impact that he had on her life, and that Georgiou as a mother wasn't enough, and this idea that Lorca groomed her, and that you know, it became something more than parental, which, you know, of course, ew, but so be it. And that's when it basically, you know, it's a technique that I like to call it's the Kaiser Soze moment, when we see flashbacks of like somebody putting something together and they're like, oh my God. So she metaphorically dropped her coffee cup when she realized, like, oh my God, this Lorca is actually from the Mirror Universe, which is indeed the big theory that we had quite some time ago. If someone in the chat, and if you're in the chat tonight and you were the one, please take credit. But if you weren't, don't pretend. Don't take credit. Nobody likes stolen credit. But if you're the one who pointed out that the scarring on Lorca's back when he was in bed with the Admiral were symbols from the Mirror Universe. And Frank and I said, you're absolutely right. But I don't remember noticing that. Did you notice that, the scarring? Were you smart enough?
I saw the scarring, but I didn't necessarily think, like, oh, make the jump to, like, oh, this is the Mirror Universe.
Yeah, okay. No, yeah, I mean, I saw it, but I was like, oh, this means something. I'll look it up. But then, like, an hour later, we were in here, and somebody explained it to us. So, but we're taking credit for that, because this show, theorized that he was from the mirror universe. I had a more elaborate theory that I wish actually had been true, which was that everything was the mirror universe, and they just didn't realize it. But or sorry, a mirror universe. So that's sort of a very interesting reveal, and it sort of goes hand in hand with this, with Lorca in the Agonizer saying like, "What was her name?" And then you think that it's a Lorca from our world, so he has no idea. So it's like, well, you're gonna have to kill everybody because I don't know what her name was. And then he was just waiting for the moment where he got out, which before even the big reveal that he was indeed a mirror Lorca, I did think, I'm like, all right, the people that keep kind of getting close to him, I think he's probably gonna do something, but he's a lot tougher and more badass than we thought he was. So he's not from the Prime universe. And I like that sort of one of the reveals was the sensitivity to light, which is something that we hadn't really dealt with in Lorca for at least several episodes. I think actually the mud prison ship episode was the last time where it really factored in, So even though we take credit for having predicted it, Frank, what did you think about the reveal?
Interesting, because I mean, it certainly brings up a lot of questions as well. It's like, is there, where's the Lorca in the Prime universe? Is he dead? Is he just, or is he still alive? What's the deal with that? How long has actually Lorca been in the Prime universe? I mean, certainly we know that Giorgio was saying that the Mirror Universe Burnham was searching for Lorca for a while, but we
yeah, but was it like 5 years? Was it 10 months?
Exactly.
So yeah, but I think that he probably very clearly crossed over somewhere in that time frame. And yeah, that'll be great to have them kind of explain that. Cherry, what did you think about the big reveal? You were not part of the brain trust, the think tank that theorized that this is what was going on. What did you think when you saw that big reveal?
Well, I knew he was always off because he didn't seem to follow the Prime Directive. He had no concern or empathy for anything except for himself. I always thought it was kind of strange the way he plucked Michael out and was like, she needs to stay on the ship.
Yeah, that was I liked that explanation. Is like, oh yeah, he very carefully needed this, mutineer.
Yes.
So yeah,
and I couldn't figure out why. He didn't seem to care about her having a boyfriend, but he acknowledged it, but he never really said anything. He was like, whatever, do what you need to do. So I always knew he was evil. I just didn't know why or how he was evil. But now that we know he's from the Mirror Universe, it makes a lot more sense as to why he does certain things and why he behaves that way. I still don't like him, and now I have a justification for not liking him. I'm hoping that the Emperor just embeds her foot up his behind for grooming her child.
Yeah.
Who, in my mind, has now become a child molester / pedophile. So I'm officially just really hating him. Because she was like, whenever I hear someone say grooming, to me that means you start doing stuff with them when they're too young to be able to understand what's going on. And I think that's why she was so upset that she had to kill her daughter, because she knows that Lorca manipulated Michael. And so Michael was sort of lost because she didn't feel she had enough love and support from the emperor that she got from Lorca, but Lorca was doing it to manipulate her. But I do have to say, I think he likes her, because when he said to the guy in the torture chamber, I found someone better.
Yes.
I think he was talking
better
about
than Ava, his sister. Yeah,
I think he was talking about Michael, and I guess he likes black girls. So yay, black girls winning.
Yeah, well, and to your earlier point about him, basically being a child molester, it'll probably come out that he, of course, directed the Annie Hall of the Mirror Universe, as it were. By the way, we were talking a lot about the Prime Directive last couple weeks, but last week in particular, and our friend Mark Hunt, who
fact checker
is our fact checker, he pointed out that the Prime Directive started shortly after Enterprise in the 2160s, and Discovery is about 2255. This is 10 years before the classic series, 2 years after The Cage, that second part we had mentioned before. And it's interesting because when you get the star dates, it doesn't help me understand what year.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so to actually get the years, like in the movies, they'll say at the beginning, they'll say in the 23rd century, and I'm like, oh, is that when it was? I thought it was, you know. So it's tough to keep track of all of these things. But yeah, anyway, go ahead.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry,
with Lorca stuff, in terms of like manipulating, it does explain how he's able to kind of push the buttons of the Discovery crew, because he pretty much knew all of them from the Mirror Universe, so knew what kind of made them tick going over. But then also, I always felt like he was kind of dismissive of Saru, and this explains why as well too. It's like why I always get that vibe that he was always kind of like, whatever, Saru. If it gives a get to him, it's just like that's a slave caste.
It's true, because if you think about it, Saru is, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are not a lot of non-humans on Discovery. Saru, obviously, I mean, of significant rank. And Saru seems to really be the only one. And yeah, that is an interesting point, that he is usually very dismissive of him, probably because he wants to eat him. So, I mean, you know, just what do you expect? You know, it's like... what are you gonna listen to the lobster? You know, Admiral Akbar. Are you gonna listen to him, or are you gonna put him in some drawn butter? Let's see. So Diggs, Briarthon, and Nicholas Stormy started talking about Michael not liking Lorca touching her in a more recent episode. These are all good points. These are good theories. These would be interesting things to see where it goes. Do we have thoughts on how this might play out over the next 3 episodes? Cherry is our guest, and of course, as a lady, I will allow you to go first.
I have 2.
Okay.
I'm wondering if Lorca will take over his universe and stay there, allowing the Empress to come back to the Prime, to our Prime universe, because I really, really, really love her. So I want my female captain. Or is the Mirror Lieutenant trying to create a spore drive for the Empress to invade the other side? Obviously, I want the Empress to come back to the other side.
Yeah, so whatever it takes, you want her to get there. That's interesting. I mean, look, from the scenes for the next episode, you see that it's certainly going to come to a head, and there are some loyalists for Lorca, as Burnham didn't even realize how accurate she was in her description that, Lorca has men all over the course of the ship. And it's like, oh, no, they actually do. So he does. Lorca does. So, what do you think, Frank? Where do you see all this going?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what Lorca's endgame is, because certainly, I mean, this is something that is not being decided arbitrarily. I mean, this has been something that he's been planning this whole season up to this point. So he definitely has an endgame in mind, but I'd be curious to see what that's going to be. And also, I mean, it'd be interesting to see how the crew gets back. I feel like we're placing such a emphasis on the Spore network that I feel like that is going to ultimately be the way that it gets us back. But when they did keep thinking, they kept talking about like the Defiant and its time displacement that it occurred when it kind of went between universes, made me think like, oh, if they were to go back through that way, would they get shunted forward in time? And then that way you could do something where it's set post Next Generation or something like that for a second season, but with the same crew,
right?
Because they've been shunted forward in time.
And Cherry, this is something that has it came up a lot more in the earlier episodes of Star Trek Weekly. The disappointment that we're revisiting past timeline instead of going forward. It's been a very long time since there has been a story that went forward. Even though I think that was the tagline for Star Trek Beyond, but that was not forward, actually. That was indeed fairly far backward. So I think that there's some theories that are kind of gone now. Expecting that we'll have a visual of Empress Georgiou killing Lorca. I think that that's entirely possible. I think we're probably going to see Burnham's going to have to kill, because if there's one thing that Michael Burnham can do, it's get her captain killed. So even if she has to be at her hand, she could very well do it. And yes, Diggs Briarthon sort of summarizing what we were saying about Saru. How do you have respect for someone you ate?
What do you think the odds are that Lorca makes it alive out of this season?
I think very slim. I think it's another reminder, as we say week after week, no one is safe on this show. And it's interesting, too, because we see in the previews for next week some more characters who had died that in the Mirror Universe are, in fact, not dead. So, Yeah, it's I don't know. There's a lot to see. There was a comment in the chat that I feel compelled to revisit because we've only ever touched on it, and we do have a few more minutes. It's theories for season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. Someone asked if we should have Q, and I'll go first. No, because I hate Q, because Q is magic, and magic has no place in Star Trek. Magic is in Star Wars with the Jedis and all that stuff, and I love Star Wars, by the way. But there's no magic in the Star Trek universe until we have Q. Now, I guess technically you do have some more magical abilities, but the fact that Q can do everything is what really bothers me. It's what I don't like about Superman, that he can do everything. There's anything he can't do. Superman's like, oh, I screwed that up. Well, I guess I'm going to fly backwards around the sun and fix it. You know, and I don't like that. I don't like people who can do anything. John Delancey is an excellent actor, and I like the way he plays the character. But the concept of Q is not one that I like.
So every episode of Q, every Q-related episode for any of the series, did you
No,
no?
I did not dislike all of them, but I dislike the concept of Q.
Got it.
And I don't like him with the crazy hat and Encounter at Farpoint. I think that was very badly designed. Just sort of that like weird. I'm like, well, what is this? And then when you get to the end of the series, you're like, yeah, what were they? What was that? I like when he wears a Starfleet uniform. I even like the episode of Voyager that he was on. You know, I like the way he plays the character, but I hate the concept of the Qs. I don't think that the Qs belong in Star Trek, and it is not a popular opinion, by the way. I realize that.
I like the Qs.
And that is indeed a popular opinion.
And
Would you like to
I've
see them on Star Trek Discovery?
I've never thought they had magic. I just think that they were so far in the future and so far advanced that to them, they were doing magic. It's like if we went back to the 1700s with our cell phones. Witches, burn you, witch.
Yeah, but where am I going to charge my cell phone? It's not going to actually do anything. I mean, the first like hour, especially if it's an iPhone, I only have about an hour before it dies. I'm going to turn on the flashlight.
My Apple lasts 4 hours, but I don't have a lot of apps on it, and I'm very careful.
I have a lot of apps.
You're using it wrong.
Because I have so many apps on it? Yes. I have the Q app. I have the Star Trek app. I have the... No.
So from the original series then, for like Trelane.
Yes, that's actually what I was trying to think of, but I couldn't get the terminology. Again, I don't love stuff like that. It's I like the fact that the big differentiation between Star Trek and Star Wars for me was always that there was a lot more science in Star Trek and almost no science in Star Wars, but they didn't need it, but they take so much time to explain the science in Star Trek. You can tell it was important to them. George Lucas is just like, oh, dude, I don't know. Yeah, they can make noises in space, sure. You know, who cares? It looks cool, doesn't it? So I want to talk about the last new Star Trek. I watched it. And I think do you mean the last episode, or you're talking about the last film?
The last TV show that was on UPN, I think it was.
Enterprise?
Yes.
Enterprise was the last one, and yes, it was on UPN.
I watched that, and I remember thinking the last couple of episodes showed what it could have been. The big problem is I love Scott Bakula.
Yes.
Scott Bakula should not have been the captain. It should have been the security guard. He was just too old. I mean, I hate to be an ageist, but he was just too old for the feel. And when they got to the final couple of episodes, I was like, oh my gosh, this is getting so good. And the UPN was like, cancel it. And I've never understood why Star Trek, Paramount, CBS let it go fallow for so long and didn't do anything with it. And then they put it on CBS All Access, which I pay for CBS All Access because I love all things Star Trek. But I just find it frustrating sometimes with it being on All Access and the fact that they don't have anything else supporting it to justify my paying for it. But that's being petty, so never mind.
No, I mean, look, it's a valid point. There was a very long time where there was no new Star Trek. You know, there were no new movies. There were no new TV shows for quite a while. I think that they felt like they'd kind of run them both into the ground, and they didn't want to do yet another new series and maybe do some more damage. The counter to that is, well, then just do a good series. But they didn't. They didn't do any series. But yeah, there was a very long time, and I don't, you know, it's weird because to think back on a time when there was a UPN and what they wanted and what kind of notes there must have been from a UPN, I think that Enterprise, it didn't really have a good chance. You know, if a platform like this had existed, I think it would have been able to kind of find itself and not be motivated like, well, we're gonna have some kind of war, you know, because it's Star Trek and we need that. I don't know. What do you think, Frank?
Well, they definitely took the notes in terms of the theme song from Enterprise, like this, because man, they carried that over with Discovery. Just a depressing opening theme. Oh, but from Enterprise, when we have the scene where it's DePaul and Malcolm, and they're talking about like the nickname Stinky. Like, oh man, that whole episode, I could just never. There's a lot of terrible themes for that first season of Enterprise that are just rough episodes to watch.
Yeah, I was not a huge fan of Enterprise, and didn't love Voyager either. So thanks, UPN.
But if you had to choose, wouldn't you choose Voyager over Enterprise?
Absolutely. No, I don't even have to think. And again, Cherry doesn't know this because she wasn't here, but huge fan of Scott Bakula. Loved Quantum Leap.
I love Quantum Leap.
But you know, I don't love him so much that I watch NCIS Los Angeles or New Orleans. Yeah. But I do still love him in any case. Anyway, so you know, look, we had a little bit of some extra conversation here, and tell me I'm wrong about the cues. I've heard it before, by the way. It's I just don't get excited when we see them. And by the way, if they bring the cues up now here in the past, that'll be the sort of thing that Frank and I get annoyed about. It'd be like, well, it'd be cool if they ran into the Borg. Then it's like, well, what do they? No. Stop! Just stop with that. Don't find somebody. I loved DS9 because it was different. And obviously, Next Generation was the best realized Star Trek series because it was on for 7 seasons, and they were able to, you know, they didn't have a huge budget, but they didn't have the constraints that the original series had. I think that's the best realized show. I would say that DS9 is, you know, after that, and of course the original series, that's probably my favorite one, just because it was different. I liked that it was a space station, it was a different setting, and then once they had their Defiant, they were able to actually, you know, get away from the station, but then it was anchored to it. But anyway, we'll do a whole episode on DS9 at some point. Don't worry. And we'll make Kari watch the whole series before she's allowed to talk about it.
I just don't know if I ever really was satisfied with the way they handled Sisko's exit in that series.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the show as a whole I really liked, but... and then having to change Dax's because of that terrible Ted Danson show, Becker, that I forget the actress's name. Yeah.
Terry Farrell?
Yeah, that's exactly what her name is. Not the lead singer of Jane's Addiction. That's Perry Farrell. But anyway, when they had to change Dax's, it was like, oh, no, you did not. That was not well cast. No. That was like... honestly, you should have just had another brown-haired lady and told us it was the same character. We don't care.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are out of time. Beaverus says, ugh, Becker. Exactly. I think that's how the world feels about Becker. Even Ted Danson, who's very good on The Good Place. But anyway, Cherry, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
We will have to have you back sometime, whether it's during the Discovery season or just when we're talking about other things. And maybe it's when I'm being, you know, brutally criticized for not liking Q, but
you gotta give it for Jen Delancey. He knows how to snap, though. He was a great snapper for that.
Yeah, don't love the Corbin Burnson Q, by the way. As much as I was a fan of L.A. Law, I didn't love Corbin Burnson Q.
No, not that one.
Anyway, and Cherry Davis at Cherry_LA. I'm Christian Bladt at Christian DMZ. And Frank, where can people find you?
If you are so inclined, at Happy Go Jackie.
And I have to add this, Nicholas Stormy, Becker is what you watch when you have only one channel and can't sleep. We'll be back next Sunday night at 10 Pacific for Star Trek Discovery Episode 13. Only 3 more to go, but we will see you next week. Live long and prosper.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.